What we've got here today is potentially one of the biggest signs this market has given us of where we could be in the market cycle. We've seen Bitcoin's dominance break below this wedge that we outlined on a recent video, and the significance behind this is potentially huge. We could be looking at a $5,000, $10,000 Ethereum. We could be looking at a $6, $7 XRP. And we could even be looking at the end of this bull market. So there's a lot to go through in this YouTube video. If you're excited for it to be a favorite, smash up those likes. And as we get into this video straight away, I think the first key thing that we've really got to look at is how this Bitcoin dominance chart typically behaves. We've covered this extensively on the YouTube channel, so shout out to those of you that are subscribed. But to very quickly recap it, we are seeing essentially a pretty, slow build up to highs for Bitcoin's dominance, and then a very, very steep drop as well. Sometimes we don't get as steep, sometimes we don't drop by as much, but for the most part we're expecting quite steep drops to kind of come in toward the end of the market cycle. And we can get straight into price targets, we can get into the really fun stuff, but that would not be the responsible thing to do. What I really want you to do is understand this market fundamentally as well as I understand it, better than I understand it. And the way that we're going to achieve that is by understanding that Bitcoin dominance, meaning essentially how much of the market share Bitcoin dominates, is going to go down in later stages of the bull market. Why is that? Pretty simply, if Bitcoin is the safest asset in the game and everyone's making money off it, you suddenly have a lot of money on the side that you didn't have 6 months ago, for example. You're going to feel greedy. You want to take risks with that money. You want to put that money into different places and try and multiply it. And that's what we see when Bitcoin's dominance goes down. We see people selling their Bitcoin in exchange for other altcoins where they think that they can make more money, which are, by the way, all of these are super reasonable ideas. I'm not, knocking any of this. What we need to do is actually rise above it, though, so that we can essentially gamify it and position ourselves before the retail does and so on, and actually make the massive gains off it. So that's really important because that helps us understand that, when you see Bitcoin dominance dropping, that's going to be something that you see kind of toward the end of the bull market cycle. Now, what we've seen with this drop so far is really interesting. And by the way, how does this translate? At the time of recording right now, Ethereum is sitting at $4,200. This is the highest level that Ethereum has traded at since 2021. Ethereum hasn't come close to this. Actually, come somewhat close to this level, but it hasn't really traded up at this level at all now for 5 years, ladies and gents, 4 years. And we are finally now back up to this price level here and getting very, very close to its all-time high at about $4,800 as well. So a very, very exciting time indeed. And this is all happening in line with Bitcoin's dominance dropping. Now, this is a particularly interesting drop because when Trump was voted in as president roughly around over here in November of last year, what we got was a pretty much instant drop in Bitcoin's dominance. Bitcoin dominance went from a high of 61.56% down to a low of 54.6%. That was a 7% drop here. And it happened pretty quickly, by the way. If we kind of measure, how long it took, we're looking at about 2 weeks for the whole thing to have taken place. So far, if we compare that to where we are right now, we've actually been doing this for 40 days. So well over a month at this stage. And so very, very different time frames. But what else is really interesting about this is simply the fact that it was a 7% point drop, 11% in relative terms, and if we look at where we are now, we're roughly around the same levels. We've roughly lost the same percentage points in relative terms and in absolute terms as well. And that means that throughout this entire market cycle, this is now the second time we've seen a big Bitcoin dominance drop. Now, the first time that we saw this drop, obviously everybody was calling for alt season. The whole idea was that Bitcoin dominance is going to fall back into the 40s. A lot of money is going to flow out of Bitcoin and into altcoins. But then obviously, as we know, the tariff news hit and a couple other things happened. A couple of bombs got dropped and so on. And the markets kind of took a shit. And we're just kind of recoiling from that right now, which, war is terrible. All that stuff is really, really nasty. But as far as markets go, this is actually pretty good. It tells us that the markets are moving in pretty healthy ways overall because we're still actually recovering. We're still moving up. And essentially, the higher we go, the better that fall is going to be, because the bigger this fall ends up getting, the more money you and I are going to make in the market. So I think that stuff is super, super exciting. Now, obviously, there's so much going on and there's a lot of actionable stuff taking place in these markets. If you want to be able to get real-time exclusive chart setup updates from the team, that is going to be right here on 𝗙𝒂x. This is an exchange that you guys are already used to. Pretty much all exchanges are actually the same these days, but 𝗙𝒂x comes in doing the same stuff very, very well. What's different about them is that we also get to post charts of essentially coins that we're looking at trading and so on, and you're getting the same, one-to-one proof of reserve reserves, great liquidity, and so on that you're used to. So definitely check it out. You get quite aggressive bonuses when you do sign up and start trading using this exchange. The link is down here in the description, right below Bybit, which remains by far the best exchange in the game. Check them all out if you're not from a restricted region. But bringing it back to the market here, obviously everybody expected this to turn into a bigger drop for Bitcoin dominance, and it didn't happen. And right now we're kind of equivalent to where that was before. And I think this is a really interesting time, right? Because if this does turn into a bigger drop, then that's going to be a pretty clear signal that we're actually late stage bull market at this stage, because typically that's going to mean that a lot of money is going to be flowing into altcoins rather than Bitcoin, where people are ready to take on a little bit more risk. And as we understand, just basic market psychology kind of elements here, essentially what's going to happen is that if a lot of people take speculative risk in the altcoin market, eventually that's going to blow up. Eventually, because it is ultimately a pyramid scheme, right? You're only buying it because you think the next dickhead is going to pay a little bit more than you did. And if everybody's thinking like that, essentially you're going to have a market that just ridiculously inflates and inflates and inflates and inflates and inflates with no real reason for it. And then eventually, that veil is going to be lifted from your eyes. You're going to see reality for what it is, and you're going to realize that actually nobody gives a shit about these markets. You'll start to see a 10% drop in 24 hours. That'll turn into a 30% drop in 48 hours, and all of a sudden you have reasons to sell the coin because you never had any good reasons to buy it, other than the fact that it was already going up. As soon as it's not going up anymore, you can sell that shit pretty easily. So we can understand from a psychological perspective that we end up putting ourselves in that position a lot more distinctly than we are right now when people are speculating on altcoins. It's the same thing with Bitcoin. We need to be very clear about this. This is very taboo to say. People don't really like it when you say this in the market these days because, I don't know, we're supposed to pretend that we all actually love the technology or the philosophy. And don't get me wrong, I'm one of those guys. I am a Bitcoin maxi in that sense, and I love all of that stuff. But I know that you probably don't. I know that most people probably don't. And so they're not buying these coins because it's got superior tech or philosophy behind it. They're just buying it because they want to buy a new car or a new house or whatever else, right? So again, as soon as those reasons get removed, or as soon as you really, really start kind of buying highly speculative coins like altcoins, that's when you're kind of later stages in the bull market. And again, that's what this would indicate if we end up dropping quite steep with Bitcoin's dominance. So the big question is this an alt season right now? And, what we're seeing, from a couple different perspectives right now is fantastic. I mean, we were very, very vocal on this YouTube channel about how this could be, actually, I thought this would be the absolute low, but I ended up drawing this one later on, about how this could be a low point for Ethereum, where it's probably not going to drop substantially lower than this. And bear in mind, the whole market was buying as we were going down, but you had me right here on this YouTube channel telling you guys, look, this is, this is Ethereum. It could drop a lot further, and we shouldn't be, surprised if that happens, but that it can't drop forever. It's one of the strongest coins in the game, and obviously since then, it's pulled pretty much a 2x against Bitcoin now, which is absolutely amazing, because if you put one Bitcoin in at the bottom, you got 2 Bitcoin now, which is just insane. It's just absolutely insane. I mean, this happened in April of 2025, so this wasn't even that long ago. This is only a few months ago, where Bitcoin was still, around $100,000 at some pretty nice price targets. Could have been 70K, whatever, but still really, really high prices. And now it's doubled, and so you've essentially doubled your dollar holdings as well. If you do put that back into Bitcoin, which is why these discussions are so important, right? There's so many ways that you can make money in crypto, but me and I think a lot of you guys on this YouTube channel, we're interested in making money in very safe, controllable, predictable ways where we don't have to compromise on gains, right? A lot of the time when you start getting safe, when you start getting boring with what you're doing, you are inadvertently also going to be signing yourself out of really, really big gains. But that's not how it works in crypto. In crypto, if you come into this game with, a couple of brain cells, you don't need too much, and you apply some common sense, you subscribe to the 4Flies YouTube channel, you already know the deal, ladies and gents, you can actually find strategies that don't feel particularly high risk compared to the other stuff in crypto, and that you can monetize quite well and make some money off. Obviously, read the disclaimer, don't be an idiot, do your own research here, but I think that these are really, really powerful strategies. And again, what this could mean is that we're going to see a much bigger rally moving forward for Bitcoin's dominance. And what we typically see, of course, is that Ethereum leads the charge, but it's the same thing as Bitcoin. You see, Bitcoin paves the way for a coin like Ethereum to do well because Bitcoin is number 1, Ethereum is number 2, and in terms of market size. So when Bitcoin does really, really well, like I said, you got a little bit of spare money on the side. You want to put that in Ethereum to grow it even more. You do that with Ethereum, and this is where things really start speeding up because Ethereum is quite a bit smaller than Bitcoin. If we actually look at it by market cap, and this is a little bit outdated. We'll go ahead and refresh the page here. Bitcoin's market cap sitting at 2.3 trillion, Ethereum sitting at 500 billion. So it is a lot smaller than Bitcoin, especially, you know, if you stack them up right next to each other. But then the next coins that could pump afterwards, I'm talking XRP, Binance Coin, Solana, Dogecoin, Tron, Cardano. These coins are tiny in terms of market cap. I mean, Binance Coin right here, $112 billion. Dogecoin, $36 billion. It's nothing. It's not even 10. It's more than 10 times smaller than Ethereum. And this is where we see a lot of that money moving after it goes into Ethereum, because again, you got a little bit of money on the side from Ethereum. Now you're feeling greedy, you're feeling good, you want to take a little bit more risk on, and again, this is what ends up dropping that Bitcoin dominance number as well. I've lost my Bitcoin dominance chart now. I have no idea where it's gone. Let me go ahead and add that on really quick again so I can access that. And yeah, there we go. There's the Bitcoin dominance chart. And, you know, this is where it really ties directly back into the Bitcoin dominance chart, because if all of that stuff starts happening and Bitcoin's not really getting that limelight anymore, that spotlight anymore, then we are going to be seeing Bitcoin's dominance kind of reflect that. And I think this is a really big question of the market right now. We're at a turning point right now. You know, like if this thing does drop further, it's going to be the biggest drop in Bitcoin's dominance throughout this market cycle. And that doesn't mean we're seeing a big alt season. That could just mean that it's a mini alt season or whatever. It could also be something that kind of, you know, honestly ends up dragging on a little bit like this, right? We shouldn't be, you know, too surprised if we end up seeing, you know, something a little bit like this, because it is possible. And it would actually be, I think, probably the best case scenario for the market, because it means while Bitcoin dominance is kind of dropping down like this, we get to make tons and tons and tons of gains in the altcoins. But if you then reposition yourself and get back into Bitcoin at the right time, you get to again see your altcoins getting cheap against Bitcoin because they lose value against Bitcoin, and you can go right back into those altcoins again. This is really, really powerful on an exchange like Bybit, because they don't even charge you fees to trade on spot markets. It's literally free. You can go in and out of spot markets to your heart's content, to your heart's desire, and it is completely free of charge. So super, super cool. They've also opened up their EU branch as well. You guys can hit us up on Telegram if you want to get the link for that, because the EU regulations are gay as fuck. We can't put it in the description, but check it all out if you're not from a restricted region, of course. And then bringing it back to the Bitcoin dominance chart, I think this drop is what really kind of tells us a lot about what we could be seeing right now. I mean, you know, the fact that Bitcoin kind of consolidated here, formed a bit of a continuation pattern, and is now continuing to drop further is a very, very big sign for what might be coming next. And one of the ways that we can kind of get a target for what this might look like is just kind of measuring a flagpole and then extrapolating a target from the breakout point here. And then that's going to, and you can actually extrapolate it from here as well. There's, you know, I think both are equally valid. I like to do it, you know, a little bit more conservatively. And that does put us down at about 57% Bitcoin dominance, which, you know, would still signal very, very big gains to come, and probably quickly, probably pretty soon. I think that a lot of this is happening is, you know, because global markets are getting a little bit more kind of positive in terms of sentiment. We've definitely seen, you know, some rallies behind the idea of interest rates coming down. It's already happened in England again over like the last couple of days. The Bank of England just lowered interest rates a tiny bit. And so we could definitely be seeing something similar to that happening in the United States. And of course, that's going to affect the whole world. So I think that's really been one of the big factors that's helped these markets go up. Obviously, the bigger factor, you know, that's much more direct, is just the S&P 500 looking super healthy. But if this does change, and if the S&P 500 does start retracing, what we are going to see is, again, a little bit more instability, a little bit more kind of uncertainty and fear and uncertainty and doubt across the crypto markets. And that's probably going to translate into sell-offs for these coins. And again, bear in mind these market cap figures, right? These coins are tiny compared to Bitcoin. So if you do start seeing money flowing out of these coins, that's why they tend to get hit really hard. And we've got a ton of evidence of this, right? We've been looking at things like XRP, which, you know, has pretty significant drops. I mean, you know, when it hit this high right here, you know, it pretty much instantly fell by like 50%. It took like less than 3 weeks. And then on this occasion here, again, less than 3 weeks, XRP managed to lose a quarter of its entire value here. So, you know, that's why we see really big drops, really steep drops in these markets. It's because they're low in liquidity. It's because, you know, everybody's buying them. But then as soon as that buying pressure is gone, there's, you know, there's just sellers, and there's sellers that have really good reasons to sell, and an absence of buyers. And, you know, like I said, we only care about these coins if they're making us money, right? So as soon as that downtrend starts to take shape, as soon as you're no longer in an uptrend, you've got no reason to look at these coins anymore. You've got no reason to love them anymore. And that's why they get dropped so hard. You can be emotional about this, and you can try and deny what I'm saying, or, you know, bring up counter arguments to what I'm saying. But these are, you know, these are essentially, you know, ideas that are pretty closely rooted in facts, and you'll understand that if you stop and think about it for a second. I think emotional people that are perhaps over-invested, especially people who are invested in coins like XRP and Solana and so on, they don't really have that ability to think critically and understand what they're seeing in the market. And quite frankly, they don't want to either, because they're fucking gambling. They're not actually trading or investing. And people like that really struggle with kind of facing reality. It's a very, very common hallmark of a gambler's mentality. And by the way, you can be a gambler that makes money, right? Like if you're in XRP, you're probably at a profit right now. You're still probably a gambler if you can't see reality for what it is. Many of them can't. Some of them can, of course, and that's absolutely fantastic. But we really have to be careful with coins that kind of produce a cultish mentality. And that's something that we could definitely end up seeing in this market here, simply based on the fact that we are getting now a lot more speculation coming in with these altcoin markets. Bringing it back to Ethereum, where can this thing go? I mean, if we take a look at Ethereum on a kind of very macro scale here, I think the next key level on this chart is essentially going to be at about kind of 0.4 BTC per token. We're getting very close to it, and there's no real resistance between where we are and this significant level. We found resistance at every resistance level that we printed on this chart. So this is the next one that I'm going to be looking out for to see how it could end up behaving for the market. And if we do end up kind of rising up there, that could be a potential reversal point, and it could definitely line up with the potential kind of targets that I've drawn out for you guys here, because if Ethereum can manage to rise a little bit closer to some of these resistance levels up ahead, that's also going to start paving the way for other altcoins to pump massively as well against Bitcoin. And I think that would really kind of flesh out these targets down at about 57% Bitcoin dominance. As far as if we're actually going to see Bitcoin dominance fall down into the 40s at this point and see a real alt season that essentially lasts for the rest of the market cycle, pardon me, I don't necessarily think that that's going to happen. I think one of the big reasons that I don't think that's going to happen is because I don't think we're toward the end of this market cycle yet. I think that this market cycle still has a lot of time left, and I'm actually planning a really big video on exactly that topic. So that's going to be available to you guys that subscribe to this YouTube channel, and we might even put that video out first for you guys on Telegram. So check out the link to the free Telegram channel in the description right here. We post more analysis and updates for you guys right here as well. So super, super cool stuff. That's coming very soon on this YouTube channel. So make sure you have smashed up those likes, subscribe, tick the bell, all that good stuff, and you will not miss out on that content when it does come out, probably tomorrow, as soon as tomorrow. So definitely look out for that if you are interested. So much more to cover in this market, but I think the Bitcoin dominance move was the big piece of news today about where I think this could go and how it could impact prices. Things could get pretty crazy pretty quick at this kind of stage in the market, so you really don't want to be stuck struggling with, you know, beginner level problems that you don't really need to be stuck on right now anymore. There's tons of things that you can do to avoid that if you feel like that is you. We've got resources for that as well. You can literally just reach out with this link in the description down below if you want to get into our exclusive 12-week program. It is super powerful. Everyone that's ever joined has paid off the fee pretty quickly after joining, no exceptions so far. So super, super cool stuff there if you want to get into that. And obviously there's tons of other free resources as well online that are well worth checking out, because if you are still getting hung up on silly mistakes that you shouldn't be making at this stage, this is where you're going to be paying the biggest opportunity cost of the market cycle so far. So keep yourself safe, do things responsibly in this market, but this is the time, ladies and gents. This is where we really need to be seizing opportunities, grabbing them by the balls, and making the market ours, essentially. There you go, ladies and gents. Hope you've enjoyed this one. You know what to do. Smash up those likes, subscribe, hit the bell, all the good stuff, and we'll see you all in the next one.